Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon, co-author with Peter Vale of the digital book on Practice as a Way of Being. Find it at mylibrary.world. Now to our show. This is still another conversation with Tom Casey, who is the CEO and founder of Discussion Partners Collaborative. Great name. Discussion, which I love. Partners, who doesn't love to have a good partner? But collaborative means they work together. And this group does regular research on what's going on with the leaders of various size companies and agencies and other organizations, tapping in, if you will, to the mood as well as the subject matter of the attention that the leaders are giving in the world. So over time, I've had these conversations with Tom and kind of a progression of what they're learning up to the day. In fact, I think you'll hear him mention that he's working on the 7th book in the series that he's produced over the years, capturing some of those insights and predictions. So here is sort of a forecasting of what we'll find in Tom Casey's new book sometime soon, coming to your newsstand sometime soon. It is that we are in a moment with a capital M, where change is going to happen. For some of us, the way we like it to, others, the way they fear it will, but it's going to happen sometime soon after the November election. And then from there, how does one lead? To whom are they going to be serving? A lot of open questions. And it's a time, as Tom will say, to hold off a bit on the strategic plan and put a lot of attention on ourselves, on our own development and on our own readiness for change, because you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I'll leave that and you listen, and then afterwards you can make up your own mind whether we're on or off the mark. So here, again, is my friend, Tom Casey. Well, I just posted episode 267 today. And I looked at that number and thought, well, that's a chunk of my life. But as I scanned down through some of the even more recent podcasts, every once in a while, there's one with Tom Casey. And I never learned enough about Tom Casey. Or let me put it better. I never learn enough with Tom Casey. There's always more I can learn. And he's in a position to have a point of view that I can't have, but he must have in order to serve not only his clients and the clients of the Tom, help me, conversation.
Discussion Partner Collaborative.
Yes, I know Tom well, but I can never remember the name of his company. But I know that it's a damn good one. But here's my point. I'm getting to my point before we start talking, Tom. The people who read Tom's blog and his books, and now we'll talk about the forthcoming 7th book, when they read, they want to feel not only a connection, but they want to feel that there's subtraction, something to grab a hold of. Because most of us, even I, who am no longer in business at all, can feel my feet spinning out underneath me, given the times that we're in right now. So, Tom, I'm reaching out to you.
Sure.
Hold on to something tight just for the few minutes we're going to talk. And maybe at the end of the conversation, I'll feel like it's making some sense, even though to me right now, the times that we're in are completely without sense. So welcome.
Well, David, congratulations on the 260 plus episodes. So the 60 that didn't include me versus the 200 that did. I'm very happy for you. Let me just kind of level set based on the introduction and what brings us to this inflection point conversation. As you and I have been talking really now for the better part of 4 years, the issue here of leadership and what people expect from their leaders has been very fluid. Okay, beginning with the pandemic, going through the elections, continuing through the concern about a recession, extending in terms of the inability to find and retain good people. And now we're into the political season.
Yeah.
Now, there is not enough Xanax in the world that will allow people to feel good about any of those things. And or, as you and I have talked about, okay, in the past, the research we did towards the end of last year is people are worried. People are afraid. People are worried that the unintended consequences are now becoming normative. For example, before we started recording, we're both appalled at the canceling of a New York Times opinion writer, Mr. French, I believe, David French, was canceled by his church because of his support for former President Trump.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I've seen families cancel relatives because of the same thing. I've seen people that get belligerent, if not enraged, over discussions. Okay. Now, that's just one slice of the problem. As recently as yesterday, we saw the migration towards the right in terms of the elections of the European Parliament. We have former President Trump's guilty on 34 counts. And all of a sudden, that's the fault of the president and the Justice Department. Nothing to do with him, of course. And so what you're finding is that people are just getting sick of it. And that's what brought us to this new book. I'm sick of writing books, David, as I've said to you before. Number 7, I hope, is a charm. And I actually was very reluctant to write this one, even though our research has been ongoing. And I want to get to that in a second. It's the process, as you know, of writing a book is torturous. It's actually not even the writing of the book. It's the chasing people down for testimonials, or it's the arguing you're getting with your co-authors about what's the perfect word, and this is the one that I love, it's the design of the cover. Having done that 6 times, somebody should just shoot me and call it a mercy killing. So I did not really envision a 7th one. But my self-absorption and selfishness aside, the reality, as you and I have talked about after our last book, what we were looking at, and you and I discussed, is coming out of COVID. What did people want their leaders to exhibit in addition to being a good business person? What type of behaviors did they want their leaders to exhibit? And the research that led to the last book, 2021, was empathy, transparency, and accountability. Unambiguous, powerful. And not only did they want leaders to exhibit it, they wanted to reset in terms of the development programs for leaders that started to include it.
Right.
Discussion partners, we began as input to our blogs going into early 2022. We decided, okay, well, we've asked them what they want the good stuff to be. What would they say is the bad stuff? And what we did is we started a process with pulse surveys, focus groups, and conversations that you and I have had, and I've had with other clients, where I've been very straightforward in terms of the collection of data, is rank order from 1 to 5. What are the most reprehensible behaviors you are observing among leaders at the moment? And we stopped back at the end of Q1 2024. Getting pretty much close to a year and a half of data at the number 1,860, because we were hearing the same 5 behaviors in order. they were hypocrisy, number one with a bullet. Of the 1,800 people that we surveyed, it was almost 1,700 labeled that as number one. Next came bias.
Yeah.
Next came intolerance. Next came expediency. And next came aggressiveness. Now, this is 1,800 people across the spectrum, frankly, not domestic US either, who are pretty clear that these 5 things are really pissing them off, because now they're seeing him on a daily basis. Now they're seeing exhibited, obviously, the political elite, okay, political class. But when you start focusing on hypocrisy, okay, it's like when you look at the anecdotal comments, it's like having a conversation with an ex-wife and another thing and another thing. It just keeps going on and on and on with the examples. And we're coming as a world, as a globe, with the elections that have started, just kicked off this weekend. We're into the January 8th, June 8th, 9th weekend, and heading towards the elections that will take place in November. And to say that the world is looking at the United States election with an element of curiosity, if not outright fear, okay, that's a challenge. There's an article that was just published in The Atlantic talking about how people are concerned about how the election will take place, the outcome, because of the implications for NATO, because of the implications, if that's on a macro basis, on a micro basis, what's going on with Ukraine. And you just kind of net out all of these things, and then you look at the behaviors that people are exhibiting. And it's not just the political class. I mean, there's commercial leaders that are behaving like morons too. Okay. And I just talked about the congregation of a church that's canceling out somebody because they like an ex-president or don't like an ex-president. That's symptomatic of what I'm talking about. Is you're a parishioner at this church and you see that happening. How do you feel about it?
Yeah.
Okay. So the observing, and I have now college age grandchildren. They think, I had a conversation with one of my grandsons. I was driving him back to college, and he was complaining about the baby boomer generation, what a mess we created. I was really close to pulling over on the Mass Pike saying, "Get out." Or trying not to get defensive, saying, "Dude, it's not my fault." I'm just, So
Yeah.
what we're looking at is these 5 behaviors are now embedded into our normative thought process and how we're looking at people, how we're looking at the outcomes of the decisions we are making or about to make, and thinking. And this is the part that came flying out at us from this research. The people who are misbehaving think that's okay.
Yeah.
They actually think they should get a pass. That everybody else is doing it. Why don't I?
Yeah. See, that part really gets to me, being one of those old guys. But consequences, accountability, you can't, the long arm or the law, all those things that maybe it was just our movies and books back then, Tom, but we always felt that the bad guy would be stopped and the good guys would win. And that saga really sustained us for a lot of generations, including World War II, which we just, where we just honored the men and women who were there on D-Day and beyond. And it was still the good guys that, are going to get to the point where we'll save Europe, which apparently they did. But as I was watching it this time, the ceremony, listening to a very articulate, heartfelt pitch from our current president, it was running in the back of my mind, just your elements there, saying, now I hear him and it rings true.
Right.
But if so many people now have been snake bit by this idea that no one tells the truth anymore. And also adding on to that, his opposition continually calls him and his family the crime family. You get to that point where people can't even listen to our current leader, just saying, gee, that felt really good to hear that. It was really nice to see those old gentlemen have, be recognized with the handshake and the presidential little emblem they put in their hand. No, as I got halfway through it, I'm thinking, I'm feeling really bad because this should be wonderful, and I don't know why it doesn't feel that way. So maybe Tom, even I've been infected by that.
Well, I think that the melees, I remember Jimmy Carter, the melee speech. Okay, nobody wanted to be reminded that they weren't feeling good.
Yeah.
And then they needed somebody to blame. Okay, but three things on D-Day. I also was listening to that. I was out hiking and I was listening to President Biden's remarks and Secretary Austin, who I admire tremendously.
Yeah, that was a good talk. He really was right from the shoulder.
I had this overpowering feeling of sadness. Okay, and two data points here, Dave. One is that there was an episode between then President Johnson and Charles de Gaulle, where it had to do with NATO. I'm not sure whether it was France wanted in or out of NATO, and he was quite belligerent about, France as its own country, own identity, etc. And
Yeah,
Johnson's response was, "Do you want us to dig up the bodies on Normandy?" Okay,
Oh.
Slapped him right upside the head. Okay, like, you have a very short memory, dude. Okay, and one of the things that happened to me personally is, my background. I was actually in Europe, and on a Sunday morning was about to have breakfast with some folks from NATO, and President Trump had that speech encouraging Russia to do whatever the hell you want if they're not paying their bills. A lot of indigestion at that breakfast.
That was a moment.
Well, it still is.
Yeah.
This is the part that, I'm looking at this whole situation, and it appears that I'm picking on politicians, and it appears that I'm picking on Republican politicians, and I'm not isolating them, even though they're the most frequently mentioned, but I am saying that they're not alone in terms of these 5 behaviors that we've noted. But
that's right.
We're looking at this dog and pony show here in terms of who the Republicans going to have as a vice president, and they can't get out of their own way the way they contradict each other. Okay, or what they said about the president before. Okay, I was watching the governor of South Dakota be interviewed yesterday, who basically lied in her own autobiography. And her response, and this is going back to the comments that you were just making, her response to, I think it was Dana Bash on CNN, was, there's good stuff in the book too. Get over it. Why do I have to get over it?
Yeah, exactly.
If I hear people laughing about at a rally where the former president is ridiculing President Biden's stutter, hasn't held him back. He is the president of the United States. Okay. And also hearing from some of my clients, there was one man who had a conservative Republican client contacted us and wanted to know if we had anything on bullying to get out there, because he is a lifelong stutterer, and he had had it. We don't have to tolerate these bad behaviors. And we're getting to the point where unless we draw that red line and start calling them out, then we're only going to be encouraging the bad behaviors. Okay, the only way to deal with the bully is to say, stop it.
Is that the way your 7th book is headed, Tom?
Oh, yeah. I'll be canceled, I'm sure. Some clients, family, friends. I'm not a churchgoer, but I can appeal to the Pope. But it's saying, look, this is the data. This is the data, and we try to be clear here that we're not picking on any person. And I want to be very fair here. I want to be very fair here. Is President Trump, okay, former President Trump, what he's been saying, how he's been saying it, who he's been saying it to, etc. He has been consistent.
Yeah.
Since he came down that escalator in 2015, he has been consistent. Now, very few of the things he has said do I like, but I can't call him a hypocrite. Okay.
Yeah, you may. I would agree with you there.
Yeah, I can't call him a hypocrite.
I wish he were in a way because I hate hearing what he's saying, but I need. I guess I need to hear it.
Yeah, I've seen elements of the other four, but number one, being a hypocrite, I can't call him a hypocrite. Why would I? He hasn't been hypocritical. He's been consistent. And so these are the types of nuances we're trying to draw here. Yeah. But you look at the situation we're in as leaders, David, you and I go back a long way as consultants and as academics. We know how the younger generation pays attention to what we do, even how we dress. They're taking notes and they're making a decision. That's the behavior that I want to replicate, or that's the one I want to stay the hell away from.
That's right. Exactly. Like it or not, we model the behavior that by and large keeps us succeeding through the years. And the assumption of the younger is that, hey, if I do what he does or she does, right, I should be able to move ahead and have a good life. Yeah. That broke down gradually, though, over time, and I'm not sure why. And I have to go back and read at least two of your books to figure out when that trend changed. But the thing is, right now, there's more ways that people can observe any of us because of technology than ever before. And it's kind of an interesting, because I think the last time we had our conversation, we talked about people feeling separated and lonely.
Right.
So that's kind of an interesting paradox, I can be seen by more people than ever, but I feel very lonely because I know why, because there's really no human contact there. It's just like, I see you and I suspect you immediately.
Or I'm withholding judgment. And I think that's almost the look I'm going for in terms of what we're trying to do with this book, is saying, look, we're hearing people don't like that. I mean, the word reprehensible was put in as a reason.
That's a really interesting word. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that we wanted to be provocative. When we were doing this last survey, 875 is my next candle here. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to do this, but at 3 data points here, because I'm actually more optimistic than.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, it's back to that Xanax observation. But there's 3 data points. I'm remembering. Okay, these 3, a white woman and 2 young black men who were thrown out of the legislature in Tennessee. We talked about this probably about a year or so ago.
Yeah.
Thrown out because they were protesting gun control in Tennessee. They were thrown out, but then they were voted back. Okay, they were voted back. And there was a woman not of color who stood up for them, and she was not voted out. Okay, now you can draw your own conclusions of that, but one is, didn't work, they're back. That gave me optimism. Okay, that gave me optimism. The other thing that gets me optimism is a young woman who's worked with us. You've interviewed her, Lizzie. Lizzie is one of those people that feels things deeply, and she's working on a op-ed part of this book. Okay, and I'm saying is you need to articulate why you are so angry. As a millennial, why are you so angry? Because she's representative of a lot of people I'm interacting with.
Definitely.
But the fact is, she says, I'm less angry because I see the end of it. enough people are stepping up, and she's looking at the states that are challenging the abortion, starting with Arizona, Ohio, the earlier one, Kansas. So she's starting to factor that in, saying maybe there's hope. But the other one is one of my relatives, the nephew. He's Sean Casey. He works with Comcast. He's involved with Veterans Affairs. He's a lieutenant colonel, reserve, 2 tours in Iraq. I'm immeasurably proud of Sean. But he was involved with this short film that you see that Comcast, that Universal has put out, called The Aviators.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was involved in kind of a logistical relationship capacity. But, Vietnam was my first war. Okay. These gentlemen that are profiled in The Aviators were officers and a little bit older than I am. But you saw the dignity and discipline.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you jump from that, which is recent, to everybody who has seen it, it has made an impact, to the comments about D-Day. Yeah. And then you factor in some things in between. Speaker Johnson, who I don't have a lot in common with, any more than I would Congresswoman Cheney, he stood up. Eventually, he stood up. Put his political career on the line, okay, and now the aid for Ukraine is gone. Took a long time, a lot of noise in the meantime, okay, but the man actually did the right thing eventually, and it worked. He's still there. The aid is going to the Ukraine. So we do see signs that people are either meeting the moment or at least not going with the herd. And I think that there's going to be a very interesting election, because I think there's a whole group of people in Europe, here in the United States, who just haven't been heard from.
I get it, and I feel it. What you're saying, Tom. What crosses my mind is that we haven't been heard from because we haven't said enough, or stood up enough, or put up our hands and say, hold back, hold that. And that's, I'm guilty, as I'm self-charged. You sit here and you think, I see all this stuff, hear all this stuff, and I know so much of it is wrong and easy to call. I mean, and not just talking to national, international stuff. But something that could happen down the street from where I live, and would I just say, I better not get involved, I don't want any controversy. And so that has to change, and it has to change within 4 months. We have to start growing some in 4 months.
Yeah, and I think that I'm sorry to interrupt you, David, but to me the inflection point isn't going to be the election itself. It's going to be, regardless of the outcome, how do we behave?
Yeah.
Okay, if President Biden wins and the election is contested, democracy is at risk. Okay, if former President Trump wins, okay, the election probably won't be contested, other than people wanting to drink heavily if they're living in Massachusetts like me. But I think that the reality is, if we're going to be a democracy, it's put up or shut up time. This is an election. We've got 2 people who are diametrically opposed in their belief systems and how they're behaving as candidates. And we have experience with both of them of how they behaved as presidents. So go vote, and then we will survive whatever the outcome.
Well, we have to.
Well, we don't. The definition
we have to
of
survive.
Yeah. Well, my definition of survival may be, I actually think that there's more good people here, and well-intentioned people, and people who at the end of the day are willing to challenge the status quo on any side of the debate. Yeah. And I think that we're a few months away from it getting close, where at least for this in the United States is going to be an important time.
Absolutely.
And what my partners say, and it's leading me to where the 1860 came from, David, because as you know, one of the blessings I have is I'm working with a whole group of people who are old like me. Okay, and we're very, as individuals, the people who carry the business card for discussion partners. We're very interested in reading about leadership, biographies, history, etc. So what happened is while we were looking at the deterioration of how people are perceiving leaders, we began asking the question, has it ever been this bad? Okay, and I said to my partners, I said, okay, well, let's volunteer. When do you think it was that bad? Or as bad as it is now? And my partners, for the most part, surprisingly, would label themselves as moderate or to the right Republicans. Okay, which is the reason we don't talk politics at partner meetings. Nobody wants to yell at each other. But they would be more to the right, moderate to the right on either side of the blue or red spectrum. But the thing is, what kept coming back from the partners was the Civil War. 1860, with the election of President Lincoln, we had succession. And we ended up fighting a war. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives, and ways of life on both sides, North and South, were forever changed. But the other thing that makes it similar in terms of the historical piece, and the reason we stopped at 1860, which is the election that Lincoln won, first one, was that it was preceded by a lot of controversy in the then Supreme Court with the Dred Scott decision in 1857, which basically found the Missouri Compromise, the admission of slave states, free states, Missouri, Maine, unconstitutional. And then, even though it wasn't part of the Constitution of the Compromise, went so far as to say even those people of color, okay, who were free were not citizens. Okay, they didn't have the right to vote. Okay, so there was a sweeping decision from the Supreme Court, and the people in the North took unction with it because most of the Supreme Court justices, including the Chief Justice Taney, I believe his name was, were from the South.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the Supreme Court element, something that's a factor now, but we also had people who had to raise their hand and say, which side are you on?
Yeah.
The head of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, was a U.S. senator at the time. Mm-hmm. John Breckinridge was the vice president at the time of this, before Lincoln was in. Okay, and Davis went on to be the president of the Confederacy. Breckinridge went on to be the Secretary of War for the Confederacy. But the one we tend to remember was Robert E. Lee.
I was going to say, he was a West Point guy, wasn't he?
He was West Point. He fought in the Mexican War, very highly thought of. And there was discussion that he would be the first working with General Winfield Scott, okay, as the first head of the military forces for the Union. But his loyalties, which he was straightforward, as with these other two gentlemen I just mentioned, was no, I'm a states' rights person versus a national person. I belong to my state.
Yeah.
So, the thing is, this is where the similarities are, is we have the Supreme Court noise, we have an election, and we have people who are going to have to raise their hand and say, what side are you on? Mm-hmm. Okay, which generous interpretation of similarity, we think that this is something that the consequences of that vote that people took in 1860 was dramatic. I mean, some people would say we're still fighting the Civil War in other areas. I mean, that the Confederate flag that was being waved around in the Capitol is what comes to mind immediately.
I'm looking at the person who's trying to plan a business, as we say, where's your plan for the next year or the next 5 years? People whom you advise they have to make a plan. And now this whole frontier of change that we're about to cross, versus the kind of plan I have to keep people buying my product and keep people working to make it. So in summary here, if we can pull this in, what do we say? Do we have plan A, which is, well, hold off on any planning until after the election, then we'll see. Or is it plan B, which is plan for sure, create, not as a hypocrite, but as someone who can tell the truth, what you want to say to your people and to your customers, to your investors, blah, 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 play it straight. I'm already teed up to play it straight answer for you, Tom, but what would you say?
What we've been saying, what we've been saying to ourselves, and we're starting to say to clients, and we'll go out and get yelled at when we're out speaking on this, which I'm sure we will. Okay, is the three things we've been saying is planning comes second. Okay, self-examination comes first. And if you even think that you're being perceived by your associates, okay, even think it, and having any one, or God forbid, any of these 5 attributes, you'd better fix it. Or if you're in a senior leader's position right now, get the hell out of the way, because your company's going down. Then you start planning. You do the business planning, which you would be to do. But there's a big difference right now in terms of the planning, which is you got to start listening better.
Yeah.
Okay, you really got to start listening better. Okay. One of the people that I've worked with in the past is a guy named Ian Bremmer. He's on TV a lot. He has a TV show, G0. Interviewed a really terrific man, head of the Eurasia Group. And I worked with the Eurasia Group overall, and him in particular, for a better part of a decade. And one of the things that I noticed about Ian that I admired the most was his willingness to listen to everybody. Okay, he did not talk. He did not talk over. He listened even when he was being contradicted or challenged. Okay, as a result, his firm, I think, is going to be hitting their 25th year anniversary on political risk advisory. So he's emblematic of the CEO that I've worked with that I would love to see other CEOs emulate. The third issue here is don't give up regardless of bad outcomes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this election will be inconclusive in terms of what the voters really feel and the non-voters really feel.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just too close, regardless of who wins the election. It's not that the election is irrelevant, because there's too much riding on it on both sides of this. But the reality is, and this goes back to where you and I may have a different interpretation of the word I use, survival. I think we will survive. I actually think we're going to be better for this experience. And I don't think that's cockeyed optimism. I think that's the mental toughness of the people that I know are out there, because I see them all the time. They're sick of this. They're sick of this mess. They're about ready to get off of the bench and start through their vote saying something, or supporting candidates, or writing checks. Okay. Or if they're behaving the way that we think they are, if they think that they're exhibiting any of these behaviors, fix it, shut up, or get the hell out of the way.
That may have to be our last word on this particular episode, Tom. But I'm delighted with your hope-producing perspective on the toughness of people that we have yet to see, and I think we will see it. I've seen it as a teacher over the years. Some of the people I thought were going to be the least responsible for their own growth and development, somehow or another, maybe something got hit alongside the head, and the next thing you know, they're flourishing. So there is that reserve. There is that set of levers that we can pull within us if we choose to. The last thing that any of us that I know, including the people I've had on this podcast, want to be is viewed as reprehensible. I can't even say that word, but it's the right word, and it's what none of us really want to be. And maybe even the reprehensible people out there don't want it either. And maybe there's something down deep in them that's saying, maybe I better pull back on some of this stuff and think about who I am and who I'm going to be in the future. So another one, Tom, another great
David,
conversation.
On comment and close. That's actually one of the reasons that I think that hypocrisy was the number one. Okay, and I want to go back to the statement. It was headed by, I believe, the European Commission, European Parliament, a European gentleman, and he made the statement which resonates with me. He says, "It's not that the politicians don't know what the right thing to do is. They just know they'll be punished if they do it." We've got to get over that.
Yes. And maybe you'll find out that was not even true.
Well, maybe when I'm not being yelled at and canceled on the podium this fall, we'll see. Can't wait, Dave. Can't wait.
All right. We will talk before the election, but thank you for this one, Tom. I truly appreciate it. You're always making me think, and I guess that's a good thing.
Thank you for listening to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. If you'd like to hear more, go to Automatic, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And please consider purchasing our book on practice as a way of being at mylibrary.world. It's a digital book with lots of features that you do not see in a conventional book. So once again, thank you, and I look forward to you listening again.